So today I want to talk to you about whether or not you should join a startup as your full-time gig, not just part-time, not create one on the side, not kind of work with somebody else's, that kind of thing. I'm specifically speaking to you today about should you consider going to work for a startup as your full-time employment, your full-time job, if you're not a founder, if you're going to be a key employee, an early employee, or those types of things. And so today, what I'm going to share with you is kind of some reasons why you should do that and some reasons why you shouldn't do that in terms of going to work for a startup. So I'm going to start with the reasons you should not go to work for a startup. And there's a couple of them. The first of which I would point out to you is if you need consistent income, going to work for a startup may not be the right choice. Now, you may think to yourself, what if the startup that I'm joining has raised millions upon millions of dollars and that provides them runway or time to survive for a couple of years? There's still the risk that that startup will have to raise additional rounds of funding, and that may or may not happen if they aren't accomplishing enough, if things aren't going as they should, if they're not acquiring new customers, accomplishing all these different milestones, then it just may not happen for them. And so you may have consistent income early, but when they go to raise subsequent rounds, if they can't do it, they may have to do some mass layoffs or something like that. So if you feel like you need consistent income, you're probably not suited to go to work for a startup. Now, the other part of that argument is you may say, well, Jonathan, if I go to work for any company, I can get laid off. That's definitely true. But the research from my recent book shows that only the highest layoff percentage in any industry is 3%. Okay. So even I would still tell you that I would still argue that you're probably safer working for a existing established corporation from an income perspective than you are for a startup. Another reason you should not go to work for a startup is if you're doing this because you think you're going to get rich. Certainly startups give people, some people, if they're key employees, early employees, there's stories of how Microsoft turned so many people into millionaires, how Apple turned so many of the early employees into millionaires. And that's true. That can happen. But again, statistically, the chances are that most startups just aren't going to make it. And so if you're doing this because you just think you're going to get rich doing it, that's not a really good idea. Another reason to not go to work for a startup is if you need real structure in your day. With most corporate jobs, even if you work remote, you have some structure and some cadence and regular things that occur with your functions. At a startup, particularly early stage, when there's only a few key employees, you're going to be doing lots of different things. And so your structure will vary day in and day out. So if you're the type of person that does not do well with an unstructured schedule, then I don't suggest you join a startup. Also, not an income perspective, but from a benefits perspective, if you're looking for really good, solid benefits, then a startup may not be right for you. So remember, particularly with health insurance, this is based on the number of people that work for your company. Generally speaking, when you have more people working for a company, the cost of your health insurance benefits is less because they can spread the risk across that many people. And so you're looking at less of an increase year over year and those types of things. So if you need full corporate size benefits package, 401k, matching dollars, all those kinds of things, really good health insurance, then a startup may not be right for you. And then lastly, this goes back to a little bit to the structure. If you want a sort of normal 8 to 5 schedule where you clock in at 8, you go to lunch, you clock out at 5, and you're done for the day, then most likely a corporate job is going to be better suited for you. But if you are looking for flexibility in things, then that could be a good reason to go to work for a startup. So let's talk about some reasons to join a startup. One of the best reasons to join a startup, if you can stomach all the other things that we just talked about, is that you get very broad experience. When you're an early employee at a startup, people end up doing and pitching into jobs that they're not necessarily always meant to do. So you may be working in the marketing department for a startup, but with startups, because there's so few employees, you end up wearing a lot of hats. And that gives you very broad experience and exposure to things that you wouldn't normally at a big corporation. If you're in a big corporation and you're not in the finance department, you're probably not going to be exposed to a lot of experience working with financial projections and all these other advanced financial concepts. Whereas in a startup, you may get exposed to those things if you're in the first few employees. Another reason to join a startup is because, frankly, it's pretty exciting. Not that corporate jobs aren't exciting, some of them are, but startups can be exciting because things are changing and moving so quickly in a startup. The pace is hectic in a startup. And so if you like that type of thing, it can be very exciting because you're sort of changing the world. You're bringing something brand new to the marketplace. It's not existing. You're sort of challenging the status quo in some instances. And so that's a really, really good reason to be part of a startup. Another reason to be part of a startup, if you like a less formal atmosphere. Now, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that every startup is like Google and has all these cool office spaces with cool toys and ping pong tables and beer kegs for after hours and all this different stuff. Sure, there are some that do that. But what I'm talking about is if you just like a less formal structure, if you like the ability to walk into the CEO's office and have a conversation with them, that at a startup with very few employees, that's more likely to happen. I've worked at corporations where you can do that, but it's not as common that you get exposure to the C-level folks in a big corporation. Whereas in a startup, you should get exposed to just about everybody, and it's a pretty informal process. With a lot of startups, when they're making decisions as a team, they don't, schedule it 2 weeks from now. They just decide to get together in the hall and talk about what they're going to do for a given feature or decision. So startups tend to be a little bit less formal of an atmosphere from a structure perspective and discussions and who you can talk to and who you work with and where you work from and all these different things. So if you like that type of structure, less formal, then a startup is good for you. And then finally, if you like flexibility, then most likely it's going to be better for you to work for a startup. So, there are corporations who are loosening how they manage employees these days. You've got remote work and all these different things. But generally speaking, with a startup, it's going to be, again, less formal and provide you more flexibility to where you can control your schedule. If you're a developer at a startup, you may not have to work at 8 to 5 schedule. You may be able to work, 5 in the afternoon or the evening all the way until midnight, if that's what you prefer, and you're delivering code when people need it. So startups tend to have a bit more flexibility. So that's a couple of reasons why not to go to work for a startup and kind of some reasons why you might want to think about a startup. And then lastly, today, what I want to cover with you is how to get compensated. Some startups, if they're well funded, are certainly going to pay you a salary. But what you need to understand is, as an early employee, there is a chance that you will not get paid market rates for that salary. A lot of times startups will try and bring talent to the table. They may pay good salaries, but not market rates. What they will do is provide you other benefits. So as a key employee, you may have the chance to get some equity in that startup, whether they grant you some shares and you're just sort of given those over time for the work that you've done, or maybe they actually are just giving you ownership in the business as an early employee. Most cap tables in a startup reserve some shares for early employees, and so that's one of the ways that startup founders can get compensated. So I just want you to think about these things when you're considering if you're going to go to work for a startup or not. Know that there's some things that you need to consider that are going to be different from a traditional corporate job. And if those are better suited for you, then a startup may not be right. But if you're the type personality that likes some of the aspects that come to working with the startup, then it can be very exciting. You can learn a lot of new skills and get exposed to a lot of things that you may not get exposed to in the corporate world. And that can really help your resume along the way. Hope that helps. Have a great day.